I'd like to welcome to the stage producer Sean Hogan, director Paul Goodwin, and Matt Brooker, who writes under the pen name and draws under the pen name Disraeli. Thank you. Okay, so thanks for bringing us the film. 2000 AD, just to start with, for you two guys, is such a mainstay of British comics. There's been such a launchpad for so many kind of big comics names. Was the impetus for this film just a kind of disbelief that it hadn't been made before?
Yeah, partly.
Because it seems kind of weird when I knew that you've been doing this for a while. It just seems like, wow, it's such a sort of big kind of part of comics culture and such a big part of kind of sci-fi culture. Was that what was in your head? It was like, oh my god, I can't believe we need to do this because nobody else has done it before.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, we both grew up on it. We were both huge fans of it, and when it started as a conversation in the pub, and when Paul suggested it to me, I was kind of like, it was just a eureka moment where I was like, holy fuck, why has no one done that? And we couldn't believe that no one had done it. And then
you do a search on, see.
Yeah, so I knew there was the Comics Britannia thing and all this stuff.
There
we knew there had been bits and pieces about it.
There was the BBC did a Comics Britannia 3-part documentary. I don't know if anyone saw that, but in 2007, and they gave like 10 minutes to 2000 AD across 3 hours, and it was the third part of it. I don't know, Matt, you remember that, but I remember sitting down super excited to see 2000 AD celebrated in a TV show, in the public forum, and they just gave it such short shrift, like it burned me for years. I mean, I was carrying that around for years, and
I think everyone felt the same, because when we started doing it, like certainly when we spoke to Pat and all this kind of thing, he was sort of like, this is long overdue, this needs to happen, and we were like, why has no one done this?
So was Pat the first person that you got on board? I mean, was it a case of we need to get Pat Mills, and if we get Pat Mills, then that it'll all kind of come together, or?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say he was the first name on our list. We had like the big 2000 AD heroes that we really would have loved to have got, and we always thought Alan Moore would be a long shot, and sort of, as you can tell, he didn't make it in the end. But Pat definitely was, obviously, as the creator and a guy that's been with it for the whole, spanning all the years that he's been, and still writing for it, now, this week, right? So, he was obviously our spine. So yeah, it was a big important interview for us to get, certainly.
I mean, it's strange to think in a way that 2000 AD could be a bit sort of under the radar in terms of culture. Do you know what I mean? Because it's such a kind of big part of British comics culture. But it's never been on the same level as kind of Marvel and DC, who are now these kind of billion-dollar kind of industries. Do you think there's something inherent in the comic itself that means that it's never going to be a Marvel or a DC? That it never wants to be that?
I mean, I think there's something in the comic itself, partly in just what it is, and that it's a weekly anthology comic, which is something that's never translated well to the US market, so there's always that. And then also, obviously Marvel and DC ended up cherry-picking it and kind of ripping off a lot of what they were doing, but we were doing it first. And they kind of made it work within their industry, but 2000 is always slightly ahead of the game. It's never going to play it safe. It's always going to be sort of trying to do something a bit different, and I just think it's the classic kind of indie model where the big corporations kind of go, oh, you guys are doing something really interesting, you're independent and you're risk-taking, all this kind of thing, so we're just going to we'll let you do what you're doing and we'll swoop in and cherry-pick the good stuff and we'll go off and do our thing. And, it's just the way it works. It's the way it works in culture across the board. And
Matt, I mean, do you think when you're creating stories for 2000 AD, what makes a story inherently 2000 AD? I mean, is there, if not you'll set a brief by the comic, is there a brief inside your head of like, this is what makes a 2000 AD story?
Well, I mean, you've got to bear in mind that with 2000 AD, I just do the art.
Yeah.
So I'll actually be presented with scripts. But I mean, I do certainly with Ian Edgington, and increasingly when I collaborate with Rob Williams, we actually sit down and we'll kind of bat ideas back and forth. And I think it comes back to this thing that was mentioned in the film, that there is a is a kind of distrust of authority and a distrust of microphones, and a distrust of kind of like heroic archetypes and all this kind of stuff. So there's a whole load of things, I think, in particular, that the Americans kind of want embedded in the structure just to be able to take for granted. That 2080's kind of stories are always kind of going, yeah, that's a little bollocks. You know, and he's looking for ways to kind of prise at the edge of it and show you kind of what's underneath.
And is that why it isn't ever going to be kind of Marvel and DC? It's never, you know, it's, for example, I mean, Judge Dredd is a really good example. You've got a hero there who, you know, if that was a Marvel or DC kind of hero, they would have to take their mask off, and obviously in the first, the helmet off, sorry, and obviously in the first film he did, and, you know, it's Sylvester Stallone, which I don't think anybody kind of really appreciated. But yeah, and in the more recent film, which is a much better film, yeah, he didn't. But then it wasn't ever, you know, didn't ever kind of reach the kind of success.
And also, I mean, I think just playing Judge Dredd would in some way have to be nicer. It would have to be more clear that Judge Dredd was on the right side. And I mean, you know, this is just like purely personal interpretation of it. But the way that I think of Judge Dredd is that, like, the best thing you can say about Judge Dredd, like if you want to define Judge Dredd as being right, the best thing that you can say about it is that in an impossible situation, he's maintaining some sort of order, and that's it. And I think one of the things that 2000 AD does is it separates out a load of stuff that gets bound together and people don't question it. So it's like something that always used to kind of like really strike me about American stuff, I mean particularly a lot of like really popular American superhero comics, is they bind together a whole load of things like, you know, wanting to save the world and wanting to fight for truth and justice. Like those two things go together. So you end up with you know, like some great like 98 parts of, you know, like multi-series crossover, where like they're in the middle of trying to save the world and they do the equivalent of like rescuing a kitten from a bloody tree or something. It's like, you know, and you know, Judge Dredd isn't at all about that. I mean, I think the example he gave in there of the end of the Apocalypse War story, where Judge Dredd kills 1 billion people in one go to end the war. And you know, you actually look at it, and in fact, years later they came back to it and sort of went, hang on, you know, were the 400 million people who lived in Mega City 1 actually worth the lives of the 1 billion people that Judge Dredd killed, the 500 million people that Judge Dredd killed in Russia? And you know, it's actually an open question. And that kind of thing is terrific. But I think kind of. I mean, I keep defining it as American, but I think in more kind of comfortable genre fiction, there would have to be a right answer. You would have to find something, and it's like, no, it's what he did. His job was to win the war, so he won the war.
Yeah. It's interesting because 2000 AD has got a kind of international, intergalactic cast of characters. But do you think there's something about it that is inherently British?
Oh God, yes. Yes.
And what is that? What is the inherently British part of 2000 AD? Is it a worldview? What is it?
I think it's a worldview. I mean, when you look at particularly Mega City 1, Mega City 1 is not America. Mega City 1 is not America at all. It's set in America, but the more you think about it, if you actually just think, okay, Mega City 1 is Britain, and the more you think about that, the more you realise it, and the more bizarre it actually seems that Mega City 1 is located in America, because it actually has almost nothing in common with American culture. And I think there's a kind of integration of a particular kind of nasty kind of sense of humour that probably does go back to kind of like, you know, Leo Baxendale and stuff like that. I mean, again, I feel like I'm just like reiterating bits of the film, but you know, was it Kevin O'Neill said something about, you know, it was one of the things they did was they took that kind of Baxendale sensibility and ported it into adventure comics. And we've not kind of seen that kind of, you know, that kind of like flavour for kind of like nasty little jokes and nasty little tricks. But you would see that kind of stuff peppered through a lot of 2000 AD stories, and it was one of the things that always kind of identified it. You know, the fact that every 2000 AD story has a little kind of at the end has a little kind of next episode thing, and the next episode is always some kind of like sarcastic little pun on something or other, which also reflects on the episode before, and God knows how they keep doing that for 30 odd years.
In terms of the film, how you got a fantastic cast of people who speak on camera. How open were people to talking about 2000 AD and talking about the past? Did you find everybody was kind of welcoming what you were doing? Was everybody sort of up for it immediately, or was in terms of the interviews, how did they go?
I think, in all honesty, in fact, when we went to interview you, Matt, you said one of the kindest things, I think, which summed up a lot of what the other people we'd spoken to said, and you said to us you felt it was actually quite an important thing we were doing, recording, the eras and the.
I mean, not to be pessimistic, but you leave this another 10 years, and you're either not going to have around some of the kind of first generation people that you're talking about, or they're not really going to be in a position to talk to you in the way they are now. So yeah, I think we are. It's like that old cliche. I mean, how many people out there have sort of listened to their granny talking about how life was when they grew up and thought, God, I've got to come back with a tape recorder and sit down and get her to talk about this, and you never do. And I think this is definitely the equivalent of that. You actually bloody did it. It's fantastic. And presumably you've actually got a lot more material. I mean, you must have a lot of extra material beyond what's in the film.
So is it going to be a lot of DVD extras of other kind of interviews, or
we're working on that. We're working on that. But yeah, I think we were very clear that we didn't want to make a puff piece. We kind of thought it would be insulting to 2000 AD itself if we made a puff piece about it. So we didn't want to sort of shy away from anything. And luckily, certainly the first generation of people who work for it are distant enough now where they're kind of quite happy to tell you what they think. Sometimes at great length, like Pat, who interviewed for 11 hours.
11 hours straight? Or?
Pretty much, with like occasional breaks for drinks.
Pat's was the only interview where we had a break for dinner, and then went out, came back and carried on into the night.
And what have people's reaction been to it in terms of the people who've been in the film? This is your first time seeing it, is that right?
Yeah, I've not seen it before.
Yeah. I mean, somebody like Pat Mills, was Pat kind of into it when you saw it? I mean, because obviously you're trying to get everybody's perspective on this. Yeah. It's not just the Pat Mills story. You're trying to get everybody's perspective on this. So I just wondered how people kind of reacted to it, and you're trying to be as fair as possible as filmmakers. So.
I mean, I think generally favourable. I mean, certainly Pat saw it for the first time and immediately started taking issue with me about certain things in it, which I sort of had a long back and forth conversation with him about. And then I realised that I was never going to make him see my point of view. But then he watched it again and he kind of did a 180. He was like, I see what you were trying to do now, So he's sort of come back to our side of things. But that's Pat for you. He's temperamental to say the least.
The thing is, for a guy like Pat, it's almost his life story. So we were careful in the edit to make sure we were respectful, but at the same time holding him up and championing him to get respect for the things that he'd done. I think, but I think it must have been quite an intense experience for him, particularly to watch that the first time through, and he did kind of have a bit of a few issues with it, which after a few months and then a second viewing, he, like Sean said, did a complete 180 and was like, oh no, I get it, I get what you were doing, I get why you made the decisions and included some of the bits which he has
certain people that I don't like.
Yeah, But this is the nature of of creative people, and I mean it's a comic that has housed some ferocious creative talent over the years. There's bound to be ups and downs, and least of all Pat himself. But yeah, generally speaking, the response has been fantastic. We're really pleased.
Great. I'd like to open it up to the audience. If anybody in the audience has got any questions for the guys up here, is there anyone? Any hands up anywhere? Yes. Down in front here.
Favourite 2008 story? Everyone.
Sky Chariots.
Oh, sorry.
Favourite 2000 AD stories, the chap said.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Nemesis. catching the blitz spear. I think that was one of my favourites. But Sky Chariots was amazing.
Yeah,
Wasn't it?
yeah. I'm afraid I've got to go with Sky Chariots as well. Well, for the artwork, Sky Chariots. For the writing, Halo Jones Book 3.
Yeah, can't disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I would always kind of default and say Nemesis generally for me. Like, Dredd was probably the first thing I got heavily into as a kid, because it's kind of, you know, that's just like the entry point for a lot of people, but then when you read Nemesis, I was like, holy fuck. I was just like too young to properly understand it, but it was like, wow, that really fucked my brain up.
We put the panel in the panel from Sky Chariots had to be in there, that one panel with the eagle right in the foreground. McMahon did, this is a Slane story, sorry, but in case I skimmed over that. And he just created this incredible panel with the flying ships behind, the fleet of ships, and they were just kind of in the background, but the front, the page opened that week with just a shot of an image of an eagle feeding its young right in the foreground, and everything that's happening in the background. I mean, I've often thought to myself, if I was to say to get some sort of 2000 AD related tattoo or something, that would be the image for me. I mean, I sat and stared at that for many hours.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Yes, over there.
Just as regards the stuff that you have filmed and had to cut, is there anything that you really, really wanted to get in there but had to go for a time? I know you can't go into too much detail and go really deeply into every strip, but you mentioned something about the origins of the Road Trooper character. Did you film that? And is that likely to be an extra?
Yeah, we did. You know, the way we've used when we touched on each of the characters, what we felt from you know, an edit point of view was that you know, Nemesis, Strontium Dog, Dredd, Halo Jones, each of those characters allowed us to sort of focus on a particular issue, sort of either as part of the history of the comic or as an issue in general to do with what the writers were trying to do at the time, like Nemesis, obviously Pat's views on the Catholic Church, and Strontium Dog to do with, you know, racism or whatever, and the thing with Road Trooper was it did have to go because there were some really, really great stories about the intro, but it was kind of an insular story. I mean, yeah, Sean, tell it that story. What was that? Dave told us about
the original
Jerry's script.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the reason we lost Road Trooper as well is because Jerry Finley Day, who co-created Road Trooper, was meant to be speaking to us and then pulled out at the last minute. So it's kind of like, if you haven't got the guy who wrote it from the beginning, it's kind of, you know, it was difficult to keep it in. But Dave Gibbons told us about the original conception for Road Trooper, that he was going to be like, the idea was that he would be pieced together from different parts of bodies of different soldiers, and so the idea was that he'd have Italian legs that he could run away really fast. I think that one got nixed pretty quickly. You know? So luckily they moved on from that.
My own personal kind of headcanon, Road Trooper takes place in the same universe as Dora the Explorer. Because she's got a backpack that can talk, and so that's the future for Dora the Explorer. It's just kind of wasteland. Any other questions? Yeah.
On the back.
One at the back, just right in the back there. Just make everyone advance as far as possible.
The bit where you had the well-known celebrity that was scrubbed out. Well-known celebrity. But presumably they're not here, so they're not going to sue you. So, I mean, who was that? Did they tell you off camera who that was?
I might defer that to my producer.
Who would you guess it might be, Carl?
Keith Chegwin?
Cliff Richard.
It was a legendary performer, still going, notable for his purity. He's recently been performing on stage, I think the other week or so. I saw a live review of him the other night.
This week, I think. He's in Albert Hall this week.
Yeah.
Google it, quick. Well, we took that. I mean,
Recently got investigated for possible involvement in certain stuff that's allegedly been going on.
That was an issue we had with that. Like, we had to get we had to run the whole film had to go through legal, right? And that we had like a panel where like Bishop drew a line for us and said, if you look, you can see it, and it was in print, and so we had it in the film at one point, and basically the lawyer said, yeah, I don't think that's a very good idea, like, just in case. I mean, it's a bit unsavoury, at best, but yeah, I think if you Google Albert Hall, it's very
Okay, there you go, something to do while you're in the bar later. Any other questions? Anybody else? Hands up. Yes, just over there.
Thanks, Eleanor, by the way.
You're welcome.
Sterling work.
Still harping on what you weren't able to put in. Can it be preserved in an archive for comics historians? Is that a possibility in any way?
Well, it's preserved. I mean, Lynn, we've got it archived. It exists. I would love to. At the moment, there's going to be a DVD which we're putting out just for Christmas, and that version is just going to be the feature on its own. We're playing it just to see if there's interest in. There is so much extra footage. I mean, we interviewed more than 40 people, averaging more than an hour each. I mean, there is the first edit, the first assembly we had was like all day.
Yeah, I watched like an 8 or 9 hour version.
Yeah, and that was all the good stuff. With all all the good stuff that we were like, right now we need to make a film out of this.
Yeah.
And we've got it. So
I think the thing is, it's sort of like you have to. The realities of putting a film out these days is you kind of have to deal with what distributors want to put out, and like we know that we've got all this stuff we could put out, and we're kind of hopeful that we might be able to put some of it out at some point on a DVD or Blu-ray or whatever. But I think it's something we've spoken about before as well. It's kind of like if that doesn't happen, or we only manage to get some of the stuff out there, I think we certainly look at possibly just putting it online or whatever, and just sort of saying, look, here's what we have. By all means, the world should be able to see this stuff. They should be able to see all 11 hours of Pat talking.
Would the lawyers have to look at that?
Yeah,
as well?
That's also an issue. Yeah.
You've probably got
Lawyers are
contact with the
expensive.
lawyers. Okay, just one more question. I think if there is one. Anybody? Yes, please.
Sorry, it's just a silly request for the DVD. Can we have a supercut of Pat Mills saying "fuck off"? That would be amazing.
Sure. Email me.
Okay, just to finish off, I'd like to ask Matt, actually, from your kind of perspective, what's the future looking like for 2000 AD, do you think, in terms of the comics business, in terms of comics moving more to becoming digital? Do you think there is a future for 2000 AD? Is it looking rosy at the moment?
2000 AD's been about to expire at any time since about 1977, so I actually feel more hopeful about it than I've felt for a long time, and I think that's largely because of Rebellion and the Kingsleys. I happen to know a bunch of people who worked for Rebellion in its various earlier incarnations, including people who know the Kingsleys relatively well. And basically one of my mates has this extremely kind of plausible theory of why the Kingsleys want 2000 AD, and it's essentially to do with raising Rebellion's status within the games food chain by actually turning it from a company that does jobbing work into a company that owns intellectual property. And what that means is that 2000 AD in some form will not be allowed to die whatsoever there is a rebellion, because it's kind of it's not just a sort of vanity project. It's actually integral to the kind of identity of the company. What they've been really good at is moving 2000 AD from, I mean, when it was owned by Egmont, it was still dependent basically on weekly sales, and there was kind of some reprint material, but it was done in this very kind of piecemeal way, and Titan Books, who'd done reprints in the 1980s, still owned a lot of stuff. And basically, Rebellion have been really good about getting everything back in their own control and doing it in a really systematic way. So I mean, you've now got, you know, the first, I mean, I've lost track, it must be the first 20 odd years of Dredd at least in kind of fairly affordable volumes and all the other characters, and that is actually what sells. The whole model of comics everywhere in the English-speaking world now has really gone from using the weekly or monthly publication as a way of generating material that you make a profit on when you bind it into collections and sell the collections. That's been the case for most American comics since the middle late 1990s. Rebellion have got into that relatively late, but they've got into it with a vengeance. They've been active in trying to push 2000 AD on things like, I don't know if it's the iBooks platform or iTunes, but it's one of these things where basically if you've got an iPad and you're in the States and you want to read 2000 AD, you've got a digital subscription and it just pops into your inbox every week. So they've kind of eliminated the problem for readers around the world of actually just getting hold of it, because that used to be a fiercely difficult problem. You know, what extent any or all of those things is going to work, I don't know, but they've really given it the best possible shot at actually bringing it onto a sort of modern economic footing. And so from that point of view, it's like I'm really kind of hopeful about it, because it's literally the first time in 2000 AD's history that they've had no one who's got any idea of what to do with it, and any sort of positive plan of what to do with it.
That's good. Good to think that 2000 AD's future lies in rebellion. Thanks very much, guys, for coming and bringing us the film, and thanks for asking. And Matt, if you're happy to sign, if anybody's got anything that they want signing, Matt's going to be downstairs in the mezzanine corner bar, which is one floor down from here for the next short while. So do that, and I'd just like to say thank you to Paul, Matt and Sean for coming again. Thank you.